Olá, boa tarde. Meu nome é Ana Romã, eu sou uma das curadoras da exposição A Terra, o Fogo, a Água e os Ventos. Essa sessão vai ser conduzida em inglês, então quem precisar de tradução, tem tradução simultânea disponível. A gente vai fazer uma conversa entre os artistas da mostra. A gente começou essas sessões ontem e hoje a gente tem um outro momento de continuação desses diálogos e conversas. Hoje a gente está com Nolan Oswald Dennis, aqui do meu lado, e com Chang Yuchen. Estamos muito felizes, acho que tem sido um prazer conversar com os artistas e estar com eles aqui. A exposição A Terra, o Fogo, a Água e os Ventos, ela inaugurou para o público ontem e fica aqui em cartaz até o final de janeiro. Ela é uma exposição que tem como ponto de partida o pensamento e a coleção privada do Édouard Glissant, que é um filósofo, pensador, poeta, muito importante, da Martinica, e ela é uma exposição que tem como ponto de partida essa coleção, mas que se desdobra com diálogos com artistas contemporâneos de diversas gerações. E aqui a gente tem dois artistas que nós convidamos. Eu e Paulo Meada, convidamos para esse diálogo. Então, eu vou começar essa conversa, a ideia é que seja mesmo uma conversa, querendo perguntar um pouco para a Yuchen. Yuchen, o trabalho da Yuchen está nessa sala aqui, tá? Pessoal, não sei se vocês já viram a exposição, mas é um trabalho que fica nessa sala. É um livro bem estendido, em cima de uma placa de madeira, e tem 2 desenhos na parede. E tem algumas redes de pesca também, que tem alguns corais dentro delas. Bom, descrevi um pouco rapidamente o trabalho, para quem não viu ainda, ou para quem viu, relembrar um pouco. E, Chen, eu queria que você contasse um pouco quando começa a sua história com os corais. Na verdade, acho que é legal você se apresentar, contar de onde você veio e quando começou essa sua investigação.
Wow, there's a cognitive dissonance here. Oh, okay. Desculpe. Now follow Portuguese. Boa tarde. I guess I will just briefly introduce my work upstairs, although it's a little difficult to, I think, tell without showing, but I'll try my best. The reason why it's hard to tell without show because it's a written language, meaning that it's a language that is quiet. And I began this series called Choral Dictionary in 2019 during a residency in Malaysia on a small island made of dead coral bodies. And I felt connected to them. And for lack of a better word, I felt I could understand them. And I began collecting them and translating them in the past 6 years. And all my sentences, like what I'm translating them into, came from a dictionary that I also stumbled upon on this trip. It was published in the 70s for the Chinese diasporas in Malay. So it's Chinese, Malay, English, a 3-way dictionary. And I was very struck by one that Malay is written in Roman letters as a result of British colonization. But before that, it was written in Arabic letters as a result of Islamization. Coming from China, a very distinct linguistic mentality, I always felt the shape, sound, and meaning of a language should always be intact. And I felt it was sad to not have a script. But living there and understanding people there, trying to understand, trying to make friends, I began to see that it's actually really cool to not have a body, that they have this ungovernable and intangible tongue, that no matter what language they have to learn in school, have to speak in a bank, that they always have privately. And so I began making a written language, not because Malay needs one, but because I want to participate in this fluid, open, and somewhat chaotic, or maybe in Glissant's word, a rhizonic ecology of different languages mingling together. And in the one of the dictionary that is on view was published in 2022. At the time, I had 216 words. And today I may have somewhere around 300 words, so I'm hoping to publish volume 2 quickly meaning in a couple of years. And there are 2 sentences there. I chose them for this show because I think there is a verb in Malay that means both to braid your hair, which is an act when you put multiple strands of hair in one, but it also means to compose and to edit, which I guess you can consider it in the opposite orientation. It's from one thought and it grow into many streams. And I thought somehow reading Glissant had given me an imagery of this fluid oppositional movement and also relating the body and knowledge. So that's the pair of sentences that I made for the show.
Do you wanna... Você quer... I have a question. Não, desculpa. Yuchen, você viveu na Malásia? Como que se deu esse processo? Você ficou numa residência e aí você aprendeu essa língua. Como foi esse aprendizado e como se deu esse processo? E eu também queria perguntar uma coisa relacionada aos corais. Você coletou eles lá, porque também tem uma delicadeza com essa materialidade, que é uma materialidade muito frágil e que também tem questões relativas ao transporte, né? Acho que você não pode tirar corais de um lugar e levar para o outro. Também queria que você contasse um pouco como foi essa parte do processo.
Sure. So it was a residency, but it was very experimental. We were the first and the last group of this project. Because of pandemic, everything dissolved very quickly. I guess the pretext of it really has to do with, I mean, there can be a dark version of the story that relates to Chinese presence in Malay as an economic and political foreign force, because there was this young man who wants to develop tourism, and he hired a Chinese curator to develop some artwork on the island, to brand it as an art island. But the curator said that instead of having artwork, it's better to have artists. It's more interesting to just bring the artists to the island. So that's what happened. But there was no framework. There was no agenda. We were just dropped on the island. And I plan to actually to learn to weave fishing net, because I'm also very into textile art. But as soon as I get to the island and encounter the corals, I abandoned that plan and pursued something else. And I worked with a coral conservation organization there who issued a letter for me. I trust this is a safe room. I'm just telling the story honestly.
Sorry.
So the letter says that I'm a marine researcher. That's how I brought them out, which I don't consider as an entire lie, depending on how do you define research. I do think I am researching them in a rather intuitive, you may say even imaginative way. And because I don't want to risk that again, so whenever I show them, I've been making fake ones with paper mache, and that's what's in the gallery. And initially I thought of it as a limitation, because I do think the real corals has certain aura, because they are bodies of that once had a life. But as soon as I started making it, I felt this is rather fitting in the way that a prototype of a language doesn't travel. Like, I'm not speaking Shakespeare's English. I'm speaking my paper mache English. Only counterfeit, you may say, only the forged, only the rumor spread. So I now become more and more comfortable with showing the rumor of Core Dictionary, while the actual words stay with me in my studio.
Yuchen, você escreve com esses corais e tem uma coisa muito poética. It's like poetry. É como poesia. Eu queria que você contasse um pouco sobre o seu processo de escrita, porque também parte um pouco... São frases um pouco abstratas. Você está falando dessa coisa do cabelo, e, ao mesmo tempo, elas funcionam quase como um haikai. Queria que você contasse um pouco sobre sua relação com a poesia.
Yeah. Actually, I used to protest when people say this language is very poetic. I want to say, no, it's very scientific or it's very linguistic, because I do put a lot of consideration in the consistency in the grammatical and linguistic sense. But I can understand that it's perceived as poetics, or maybe I think Glissant has also helped me to understand the word poetic in a more potent way rather than just romantic or ethereal. And I did also felt the sentences were so vivid, because when I learned English, I learned from like pedagogical materials, and the sentences or paragraphs there usually feels very dry, like calcified and removed from actual living experience. But I think because Malay doesn't have that much of a repertoire for pedagogical material for second language learner, the sentences feels like direct grasped from life. Like she's braiding her hair, he's writing a novel, father hasn't been home yet, mom is very worried. He can smell the fragrance of flower. These are just some couple actual sentences in the dictionary. I think they look poetic because they look far away from, say, my life in China or in New York. I do consider, I am aware of the danger of saying something beautiful sometimes is like saying something is different. There is an othering potential of appreciating actual living experience as aesthetics or as poetry. But I do also helplessly attracted to their beauty.
Yuchen, você pode contar um pouco também sobre essas redes, que tem duas redes no espaço? Acho que o dicionário, a gente entende que é uma compilação dessas palavras que você vem organizando e vem criando esse vocabulário e essas categorizações. E por que dessas redes, de onde elas vêm e se elas estão muito presentes no seu trabalho também? É você que fez essas redes? Ou você comprou? Como funciona?
I bought them. But initially, the first iteration of the fishing net installed with sentences in Malay, there were just fishing net everywhere. It was the most accessible and relevant tool or material that was on the island. So I thought it also came from the same nature and also human landscape. Fishing is not only survival, but economically crucial part of their lives. And fishing net is also very enduring. So it looks very delicate, but it's very resilient. It's like really hard to break it apart. That I also appreciate. And I use this kind of structure because I guess if you are trying to say something, whenever you're trying to make an articulation, it's not unlike fishing. You know, your feeling is vast and chaotic, but you need to find something that is comprehensible for others. Or if you're looking for a word, which I constantly do, I'm always looking for a word, it is not unlike fishing in a vast glossary that has been circulating for thousands of years, but you need to find some that has to do with you at the moment. And the fishing net has many different kinds. I happen to have a very good friend who fishes in New York. So these fishing nets I actually bought in New York. I think people in different cities, continents, have different relationship to the ocean, and I'm not attached to one kind of authenticity. I think my friend's relationship to the Coney Island dirty, polluted water is also very interesting. So he showed me the fishing supply store, and I found everything beautiful there. And I think because they're useful, because every design has a meaning, the metal is there to weight it down. The thicker fishing wire on the top is for you to pull in the end. Because they're useful, so they're meaningful, so they're beautiful. So that's why I use them.
Eu tenho uma outra pergunta relacionada à sua prática. você começou falando que era difícil não estar com seus corais e com o dicionário. A performance é parte também do seu trabalho enquanto artista? Você entende essa sua prática de leitura desses dicionários e de fazer frase como uma performance? Como que se dá esse desdobramento? Porque aqui a gente tem uma parte, né? A gente está vendo os trabalhos no espaço positivo, mas ele, com a sua presença, ela vira outra coisa.
I think, well, this is something I confuse myself too, because I've been teaching for many years, and I started Choral Dictionary 6 years ago, and I just find my two gigs, two roles, started to merge into each other. Like my teaching becomes more and more ridiculous and whimsical, while my art becomes more and more didactic. I'm often trying to really teach my language, but because there's no university inviting me to teach Choral Dictionary yet, I can only teach it in museum or galleries. I do think the core of Choral Dictionary is a language. Drawings, paper mache, fishing net, dictionary, performance, there are all different ways to circulate this language. And I'm happy to use whatever available necessary to circulate the language.
E, Yuchen, acho que seria muito legal que você contasse um pouco sobre a sua experiência agora no Brasil, que você teve a possibilidade de ficar aqui alguns dias, e acho que foi um encontro. A Yuchen, ela começou falando, ela é da China, mas ela fica nessas idas e vindas entre New York e China. E agora é a primeira vez que ela vem aqui. Se você puder contar como foi esse encontro para você, como está sendo esse encontro em São Paulo.
It's very, very educational and of course very charming. So because I hand carried my work and some time was needed for the framing and installing, so I got here, I think, before everyone else. I has been a happy tourist for almost a week now, and I've been learning so much. I think I was trying to decide what's my favorite thing about Sao Paulo. I was going to say Bishu, the written system on the buildings, Bishu, or it's the kisses that you can just get kissed randomly for so many times a day. I think maybe, but maybe there are actually, you know, somehow maybe this can be tied back to the relationship between body and language. I do think nourished in every way, and the Jews too. Yes, and I've been very impressed also by Sesk, because looking at the pictures, I thought it would be a little bit Sovietish, because it reminds me of some Soviet-style building in Beijing. But when I got there, I realized it's happy, it's kind, it's generous, it's dignified. And I just felt I could truly sit there and think, and I can just dwell as a person. And I've never experienced that from architecture.
Obrigada, Yuchen. Nolan, agora vamos falar um pouco do seu trabalho. O trabalho do Nolan é esse mural que vocês veem logo quando vocês sobem a escada. É um mural preto, com impressões, um papel de parede, e tem alguns elementos representados. Alguns elementos em acrílico que estão colados, e tem algumas pastas que acho que estão todos convidados a mexer nessas pastas. Não pode mexer, tá, gente? Acho que é importante convidá-los a mexer, porque às vezes a gente fica meio assim, né? Bom, Nolan, você pode contar um pouco desse trabalho e do desenvolvimento dele para cá? Porque ele já começou, essa sua investigação, ela começou em outro lugar, e agora a gente tem um desenvolvimento para essa exposição especificamente.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm not really sure where to start. I'm going to start by not answering your question.
I forgot to say you. You can present yourself. Sorry, of course.
No. No, I don't come from anywhere. No, I think something that Yuchen said about the net has kind of resonated with me a little bit, and I think it's a nice way to think about what I'm trying to do with some of my work. And I think this quality of the net also has an ambiguity. And I think I really like this about your work in general. There's this kind of ambiguity between like maybe the poetic and the technical dimension, or the linguistic, the rigor and the whimsy. And I think there's a quality of the net, which is also maybe another kind of image of the rhizome that is kind of useful for me to think with, and so I'm going to share it with everyone. And it's basically that a net is both a cage and a shield. Like, it can be a way to protect something, like maybe a kind of a mosquito net, or it can be a way to kind of capture something too. And I feel like this work that I'm doing is kind of really, I'm trying to work out through the work how I feel about a very specific stone. And this stone has the same quality of being like simultaneously a threat, or potentially dangerous, or potentially hazardous, and maybe being a kind of opening. So yeah, I don't know where to go from there, but the work that you see, it's kind of it's an excerpt from an ongoing exploration of a specific stone called 99942 Apophis, and it's a asteroid that is somewhere above us right now. And I encountered this asteroid kind of by chance. And the more I learned about this asteroid, the more I needed to learn in order to understand this asteroid. And so it's kind of like taken me on this journey into a specific kind of astronomy, like it's called small solar system body astronomy, and it's like astronomers who look for small things in the sky, not big things, not the moon, not the planet, not the stars, but like stones. And I guess in trying to learn about this asteroid, I picked up a bunch of different kind of logics, mostly coming from astronomy, but which resonate with language and logics that come from, I'd say, like my cultural and political context. And maybe the most interesting one is an idea which the astronomers call pre-covery. So it's kind of like recovery, but pre, and it's something that small solar system body astronomers do when they see something. So they see something for the first time, they see an asteroid in space, and they then, in order to work out where this asteroid is going, they need to observe it. So they need like multiple observations to understand to project the path, the future path of this asteroid. And that's not only interesting to do, but for them it's important because our planet has a tendency of intersecting with the paths of asteroids, and this is sometimes a catastrophe. So there's a kind of anxiety around where these asteroids are going. But in order to work out the path, they need as many observations as possible over as long a period as possible. And so they do something called precovery. Sorry, this is very boring and very nerdy, but this is my passion, my current passion. And precovery basically is, I understand it as a kind of archival attitude. So astronomers see something for the first time and then assume that they've seen it before. So they go into the archive of observations and they look for this small object in like the background of other observations. So people take photos of the sun, people take photos of the moon, people take photos of distant galaxies. There's all these observatories, and they look in the background of those images from these observatories for this object, which until this moment they never knew existed. But their assumption, or the assumption behind this logic, is that this thing that you don't know, you have already, you've got it. And it gets more and more interesting because they look like they're interested in finding the earliest observation. So they start by looking at like observations that they think are likely. They look in the background, but they're aiming to go as far back as possible. And the further back that they go, the more the idea of what constitutes a kind of technical image of the sky shifts. Like for them, for certain things, like for example, a comet, which is a small solar system body, they would look for even in stories, even in songs, like has this thing appeared in people's memory, and what date did it appear? If we know people sung about this in Southern Africa, then we know that it was around, and so we can kind of reconstitute its path. This is a long way of describing this process, but I think what's interesting about this idea is maybe something that like can connect us to Glissant, which is kind of an attitude to knowability and unknowability. And for me, the idea that something that you do not know at all, you can assume a kind of intimacy, but that intimacy means going somewhere else, going back in time, going to places that maybe are even intuitively unlikely to be the place to find this thing. And anyway, this rock called 99942 Apophis, it's also interesting because it's the first rock that scientists saw that their calculations gave like a high probability of like hitting next year. Yeah, so it was like a big, this is 2014, I think, and there was a big panic. And from the observation of this rock came a whole series of infrastructures for like working out this anxiety of like a potential hit. And they observed this, they found enough observations to get a better sense of the path. And so we know it won't hit next year, but it might hit in 2029, it might hit in 2033. It's this kind of ongoing thing, because small object paths are probabilities, not certainties. So even with all the observations in the world, you cannot make a certain projection, you can only make a probable projection. And so maybe this dynamic of uncertainty is another kind of gift that's come from this rock. And I could go on and on and on because there's a lot of stuff in the thing, but I just say like the work itself for me is not like a presentation of anything that is complete. It's a way that I think through things that I'm interested in, with this idea that it's important to think collectively or to think in public or to think with other people. So sharing this kind of diagram, which is not finished, maybe will never be finished, is an important part of working out what this diagram, what this work, what this interest means, or what it's for, or whether it's important or not, or something like that.
In Nolan, the phones. Eu queria te perguntar, porque tem essa parte muito científica, né, do estudo dessa pedra, enfim, desse asteroide, e tem uma parte relacionada aos movimentos e aos protestos. né, e com o uso dessas pedras dentro dos protestos. E tem uma correlação muito interessante entre esses movimentos espaciais que acontecem em uma outra escala e esses movimentos cotidianos. Você podia contar um pouco isso? Porque as imagens que a gente vê retratadas as imagens que a gente vê retratadas, e também no diagrama tem a presença desse uso na pedra nessas situações cotidianas de manifestações. Você podia comentar esse aspecto, por favor?
Yes. I think this connection to like earthly stones comes out of me trying to do a kind of pre-covery, me trying to understand this rock floating in the sky in terms of rocks that I knew or I know or that are familiar to me. And I think also to try understand, like when you read or listen to scientists talk about these asteroids, they use a language that is also evocative of language that I'm familiar with, and it's got something to do with the power of small things, let's say, like the reason why asteroids are so stressful for some people is because they're so unpredictable. Their paths change in ways that bigger objects' paths don't change, and because of that, they always have a degree of kind of risk. And this kind of potential danger, this like maybe you could even say like the poetics of a small object, immediately made me think of like my personal history of stones. And for me, that is connected to student protests in Johannesburg. Roads must fall, fees must fall. So some of those images are from those protests at Wits University, as well as like anti-apartheid protests in South Africa. A song that my grandmother taught me, which actually maybe it's a famous struggle song. I won't sing it, but the lyrics go, Watinta bafazi, watinta mbogoto uzofa. And it means something like, you've struck the women, you've struck a rock, now you'll see. And it comes out of this kind of, this moment in the struggle against apartheid, where women marched to the president's office and conducted this kind of radical protest, and likened themselves to rocks, you know, like, and my grandmother also told me that this symbol, you know, the fist, which is like the classic protest symbol, she was like, the reason why that symbol is so dangerous is because if someone has a fist, someone is like, has this gesture, they might have a rock. And that's always struck me as like, maybe the underside of this image of the protesting fist. And then, I don't know, I guess all of these connections were kind of pouring out of this rock, personal connections, political connections, and I think the rocks emerge, like, I guess somehow I started to understand that there's a kind of political history of rocks. There's like a geological history and there's a political history as well. And somehow the political history of rocks goes like, I guess it's kind of rhizomatic, you know, this kind of relational Glissantian thing that kind of pops up and you can't really trace. It's not like a kind of linear progression. But for sure, somewhere at the bottom of that, at least in South Africa, which is so kind of Christianized, somewhere at the bottom of that is David and Goliath. And the this image of like the powerful and the weak, and in this relationship between the seemingly like all-powerful and the weak, like the rock emerges as a vehicle for like justice or something like that. So these are just like a big cloud of connections that came out of trying to think about this specific asteroid that's floating above us. And then thinking about them together then made me realize that somehow the rocks on this planet are very much like the rocks in space. Like they're just space rocks, you know, but the rocks here are our like personal space rocks. Like you can pick one up, you can take it home, you can, you know. And so there's a kind of cosmic dimension to what people do with rocks. What people do with rocks is a kind of cosmic action in the same way that the orbital path of an asteroid is. At least that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know if these thoughts ever get to like a point, but I don't think they necessarily have to. Yeah. Is there anything else I want to say?
Acho que tem uma questão muito interessante do seu trabalho, que eu fico pensando. Eu sou geógrafa de formação, então eu também eu sou uma pessoa da ciência e que olha muito para isso, e é impossível isso se distanciar, enfim, do que eu faço enquanto curadora e etc. Porque vem de um lugar muito de formação mesmo. E da última vez que a gente se viu, você fez uma performance com Pedro Zilberstein, no Pivô, e existia uma interrogação em torno da arqueologia. Vocês estavam, enfim, de algum jeito trazendo algumas questões da ciência também, e dessa ciência que olha para o passado, para um debate. Queria que você contasse um pouco dessa sua relação com a ciência, porque, de algum jeito, me parece que você se apropria muito cientificamente dela e também ficcionalmente. Então, se você puder contar um pouco como se dá isso no seu processo.
Yuchen said something earlier about wanting to participate and making a kind of art project. Maybe I don't even say like an art project, just like a gesture from practice that allows you to participate. And I'm not interested in being a scientist. It's like science is not what I'm interested in, but I am curious about some of the ways that science operates. Like I would say in this work, precovery, it's just a word. It's a bit of an attitude, I would say. It's a bit of like a strategy, but it's the thing that I'm really interested in. And I guess what happens in science often is that there's a commitment to the logic of what they're dealing with, which can lead scientists to can lead scientists outside of the assumed structures of rationality, you know? Like, I guess you see this a lot in cosmology and physics, like scientists become irrational, at least according to our like intuitive understandings of how things work. So I'm interested in that. But the other side of that is that, for example, in archaeology or in geology, science is also like the front of a kind of colonial or a capitalist project. And so like listening to what scientists say can help you understand what's actually going on in a way, you know? But I'm not like trying to do a science project. What I'm really interested in is liberation histories, liberation practices. And I think, at least for this work, like, I don't exactly know why, but an asteroid hundreds and thousands of kilometers away helps me understand an ongoing, like, phenomena, which I would say is related to justice, which is the movement of stones. You know, like when a stone moves, it carries with it a potential, a trajectory, a history, a politics, and stones move. Like, I guess now we're in really like we're back in the era of throwing stones, and you see, like, in Palestine, in California, like all around the world, people are throwing stones, and somehow there's something about, like, having started with an interest in an asteroid that has helped me think about this phenomena of people throwing stones, not only in, like, the terms, like the material terms of what's happening in that moment, but in relation to, like, this long and rhizomatic jellyfish history of people spontaneously reaching down when they're faced with something that's, like, much bigger than them. So I guess, yeah, science. I'm sorry that you're a geographer, but I'm really. I just. Yeah, I think maybe the one thing I'd say is that what I like to do is take scientists seriously, but the way my model for taking people seriously isn't respecting them. It's being somehow skeptical, you know, and that's it. That's like my.
Nolan, I have a question. Tem uma pergunta relacionada à sua relação com o Glissant. Se você puder contar um pouco mais, quando você leu o Glissant pela primeira vez, como ele de algum jeito inspira, informa, e como você se relaciona com essa relação e com a poética da relação do Glissant.
Yeah, I think Glissant has been Glissant's thinking, and now more recently, Glissant as a like actual relation, you know, the collection, all of this. But Glissant's thinking has been kind of important to how I've found my way, like, into, I'd say, like, African liberation theory and practice, and out of African liberation theory and practice, and back into African liberation theory and practice, and back out. And there's this kind of constant, maybe like weaving, which Glissant's work maybe allows, encourages, and gives me kind of permission to do. I mean, Glissant, Poetics of Relation, it's like a text that, at least in Johannesburg, people are sharing all the time. And I think I encountered Poetics of Relation maybe, I don't know, 2012, 2013, like over 10 years ago. And I mean, I guess I didn't fully understand it. And I feel like my attitude to Glissant's work is that it's not there for me to understand it. It's like something that is constantly offering potential for kind of unsettling my own thinking. But there's this chapter, I think, called The Black Beach. And this has been like my chapter, you know? This is like I go back to that all the time. I guess maybe Glissant also is an artist and has these drawings, but I have been obsessed with this one drawing, and at least in the English translation of The Poetics of Relation, it's the only drawing, and it's in the footnotes, and it's this tiny little drawing in a footnote of a line that goes like this. Glissant calls it a fibril, which is like a word from biology, but it's Glissant's diagram of the connection between the Americas and Africa. And it's this really beautiful drawing that kind of branches on both sides. And that drawing is somewhere in that diagram, and it kind of returns to me whenever, I guess whenever I need it. But it's something that I've been carrying with. It's kind of like, maybe it's similar to the kind of coral. To me, that drawing is not just an image, it's a logic, and it's a logic that's kind of unstable. It seems that it can like mean many things, and in my life with that drawing, I guess it's my understanding of it has shifted over time. Yeah.
Muito obrigada. Pessoal, vocês têm perguntas, questões para fazer? Você pode vir. Pode vir para o microfone para a gente poder gravar? Por favor.
Oi, para você a pergunta. Eu vou ter uma série de viagens à China agora. Estou muito ansiosa, claro, e queria saber como um artista visual brasileiro, se a China tem equipamentos que eu possa acessar como artista, tanto para experienciar arte como voluntária, ou ver trabalhos, conviver com artistas, se há um sistema similar ao SESI na China, que alguém como eu possa acessar e talvez ter uma troca entre os países e as culturas. Obrigada.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly. So you're asking, like, how's the art education in China? That could be a longer conversation later. But now I have the mic. Can I just respond to what Nolan said briefly? Because I really feel so much resonance from multiple moments of your speech. First of all, Black Beach is also my favorite chapter. It's about a man without language. And I also really enjoy this concept of pre-discovery, because when we encounter something, that is always a re-encounter of ourselves through the new lens. And I think maybe Core Dictionary has made me realize not only Chinese language famously has pictogram in it that we already read shape, read texture, but also before any of us learn any language, we've already seen and touched the word, and maybe that's our mother tongue, and that's the pre-discovery of pre-linguistic consciousness from infancy. And I'm also like, I really appreciate this pairing. Not only we both have diagrams, but I think we are actually both dragging, to quote Judith Butler, like you're dragging a scientist, I'm dragging a linguistics. And I think your relation with science is very similar to my relationship with linguistics, which both have a colonial history. Linguistic emerged in missionaries when they want to understand other language through the lens of Latin system. But I still embrace it. I'm interested in it. I want to learn more. I I mean, we all quote Audre Lorde to say that master tool cannot dismantle master house. But I sometimes think a tool is just a tool, and it's not nobody's tool. The master took it from someone too. When I look at your diagram, it doesn't only look like rationality or science. It also looks like a jungle. Like the lines, they exist not only in European scientific papers, but also in nature. And linguistic too, I think we say categorization is very colonial, but my mom categorizes things too. Like there's an urge that's not owned by certain kind of history or practice, but can be shared. And I will answer your question later.
No, it's good. Sorry.
Okay, let me not. No, I love that because I think Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Not Dismantle the Master's House is super important. But there's this really beautiful intervention by Ruth Gilmore Wilson. And she says the critical moment in that phrase is the apostrophe. And in English, the apostrophe denotes possession. So master's tools, apostrophe. It's not a description of tools. It's not master's tools. It's the tools that are possessed by the master. And possession, how can you say it? Like, maybe a better way to think about this, or to think about tools then, is to think about redistribution. You know, like possession is 2/3 of property, but possession is also so related to theft and domination. And so I guess when we think about tools, like, and what I love about your work, and I guess this pairing, is this dimension of the redistribution of potential, the redistribution of legibility, of knowledge, which I think is at least for me, is like like my ethic around tools and technologies. Like, we should just not assume that what it's been used for is what it is best for.
Sorry. Eu acho que tem uma coisa muito interessante relacionada mesmo aos saberes. A Yuchen fala isso de forma muito bonita, né? Esse desejo de fazer circular essa língua e de que maneira você faz com que ela chegue a outros mundos e a outras pessoas. E eu acho que, de algum jeito, o trabalho do Nolan também tem um lugar da circulação, que não é essa circulação só dos asteroides, mas da circulação desse conhecimento e desse trabalho realmente ele ter uma larga escala, das pessoas poderem olhá-lo de diversos momentos, a partir de diversos lugares. Eu acho que tem um lugar muito parecido, assim. Não sei, estou falando. Vocês concordam com isso?
You agree that it's about circulation for me, a lot about circulation?
Sim.
Mais perguntas?
Come here. Ah, ela também.
Ah, yeah, good. Well, thank you. Obrigada.
Sorry. Pode tudo bem em inglês?
É
Essa
melhor
a pergunta?
falar
Em português?
Todos entendem. E aí,
Ah, tá.
Pode ser?
Pode. Meu nome é Pati. Eu não vi a exposição ainda, eu acabei de chegar, mas eu conheço o trabalho da Yuchen online, acompanho já há alguns anos. E, para mim, estou super feliz de poder ver finalmente, pessoalmente. E a fala dela, para mim, foi muito interessante, assim, quando ela trouxe... Eu até anotei aqui, talvez tenha sido um pouco pesado, mas que ela falou que, às vezes, ela se considera antipoética, né? Eu fiquei pensando no processo de trabalho dela, como eu conheço os outros trabalhos também, e eu consigo ver essa relação com a fala dela. Tem o Ius Velho, que é um trabalho seu que é super incrível sobre o fazer artístico, manual, em que ela, enfim, dá o foco nisso. Eu fiquei pensando um pouco nessa questão do labor, em contraste com o work, o trabalho e o labor, assim, né? Que eu acho que no Brasil, para mim, é um pouco difícil de entender essa diferença. E eu penso um pouco se essa questão do antipoético, de se afirmar cientista, de se afirmar pesquisadora, vem um pouco para trazer o discurso para a realidade do que é ser um artista, né, que trabalha, que pesquisa, que dedica a vida. Por exemplo, fico imaginando também esse trabalho dos corais, que é criar uma linguagem. Qual é o tempo de se criar uma linguagem, né? É um trabalho de uma vida toda, talvez. Então, fiquei pensando nisso, né? Se quando ela traz essa questão da antipoética, seria um pouco para trazer a gente para a realidade do labor do artista. E eu queria também perguntar como ela imagina, como a Yuchen imagina a gente usando essa linguagem dela, a gente se comunicando com a linguagem que ela está criando. É isso. Muito obrigada. Did you understand?
I think so, but thank you. I'm sure you're doing amazing work. But there are like multiple questions in there, right? I will try to respond to them. Work and labor. I mean, when I think of those words, I'm thinking in Marxist framework, unfortunately. Engels think that labor is what makes us human. Like our hand is in the shape of it is because of the thing we do. It's not because we look like this, so we develop the culture as such, but because we labor, we interact with the nature, it defined the shape of our hand and the whole shape of our culture. So I do think labor is something rather essential to who we are. But apparently making a language is not a useful labor, not like making a building or actually saving lives in hospital. But I am committed to my labor, and I think maybe one's lifetime is not enough for one language. And I feel very lucky that I can shelter myself in the roof of contemporary art. That I don't want to romanticize any suffering, but the symptoms that can be categorized as some kind of schizophrenia or association mania. But I'm not suffering from this association. Actually, I'm delighted by it every day. And in terms of circulating it beyond myself, I had a studio mate for 2 years, and he began to picking it up. There was one word I translate as, he had a guess, he said this is pregnancy, but I translated as reason. And I think a reason is pregnant with a result, and it's like future driven too. And there's another word he said was agony, and I translated as crying. It's an outburst of agony. I've also done performances where I eventually invited audiences to participate in the translation, which turned out to be successful as a social experiment. I think we really had some agreement in the room, like we had a dialogue in 45 minutes, it's possible. Hangul, the Korean script, was invented by one person, was a king, and it's the shape of Hangul describes the position and shape of your vocal cords, your mouth, your throat, or your tongue. I don't have a kingdom of people to implement my language to, but I am open to its circulation. Although right now, what I can do, I think artist's book is actually one escape outside of the art world. It can circulate somewhere beyond because it's, as you said, more mundane, everyday, and inexpensive. And I like to find ways to escape further. Isn't there a scientific term called escape speed or escape velocity? So yeah, I'm still working on it.
Mais alguma questão? Alguma dúvida? Não? Não? Então, acho que eu vou... a gente tem mais um tempinho entre a essa mesa de agora e a outra mesa. Então, eu convido vocês a visitarem a exposição antes da gente se encontrar aqui. A próxima mesa vai ser composta pela Rayana Raio, que já está aqui, Thiago Santana, que também já está aqui, e pela Florência Rodrigues Gilles, que não está aqui ainda, mas que também tem um trabalho naquela sala. Então, peço para vocês visitarem, porque a gente continua a conversa e a gente vai ter um momento a mais com os artistas, se quiserem também chegar mais perto, conversar. Estamos aqui. Agradeço a todo mundo, muito bom, muito obrigada aos artistas que estão conosco e convido vocês para a próxima sessão. Obrigada.